Hey everyone, welcome back to the Phoenix's Tale, your weekly Harry Potter themed podcast where I am telling my life story through a chapter by chapter analysis of the entire Harry Potter book series. This week we are diving into chapter 12, The Mirror of Erised. As I said last week, closing out last week's episode, I was so excited for this chapter, and I already knew what I wanted to talk about even before I reread the chapter. So, we're going to dive in. I am your host, Gabe. And before we dive in, since this is the first episode of the month of August, we're going to celebrate character birthdays today. And we got a couple that. Anyway, first off, on August 1st, thank God that day has passed, was Bellatrix Lestrange. On August 11th, happy birthday to Ginny Weasley Potter. Our favorite sorceress, songstress, if you want to call her that, Celestina Warbeck, celebrates on the 18th. Percy Weasley on August 22nd. Susan Bones on the 24th. Do I have to do this one? That fucking bitch Dolores Umbridge on the 26th. And to the best of my knowledge, this one doesn't have a date attached to it other than most of the references I've seen say August for the one and only Albus Dumbledore. So happy heavenly birthday to Albus Dumbledore. As I said, this particular episode was a lot of fun for me to write about, and we're going to be heading down an interesting path for our discussion this week. We're going to be focusing primarily on the Mirror of Erised itself and the idea of our heart's deepest desire. So let's get to the recap real quick. Christmas at Hogwarts. Last week, Hagrid not only let our golden trio know that Fluffy belonged to him, but that someone named Nicholas Flamel is involved. So now Harry, Ron, and Hermione have something else to keep them busy. They're trying to figure out who the hell is Nicholas Flamel. Harry spends the Christmas break at Hogwarts with Ron, Fred, George, and Percy, along with many other students. He receives actual Christmas presents for the first time in his life, including the invisibility cloak. We finally introduced the invisibility cloak. Here we go. Left to him by his father. Only he doesn't know who left it, but that gets solved at the end of the book for those who are not familiar. While he's going to attempt to get into the restricted section, thinking maybe that's where he's going to find anything about Nicholas Flamel, uses the invisibility cloak for the first time. He has a very close call with Filch and then Snape, only to discover the Mirror of Erised in an unused classroom. And for the first time in his life, he actually sees his parents and his other relatives. This one always chokes me up when I think about it because going back to what I said when he arrives at Hogwarts and McGonagall's about to take them into the sorting ceremony, and Harry kind of, flattens down his hair. It's only mentioned that, Neville's robe is fastened up, on his shoulder. Ron's still got that smudge of dirt on his nose. And I can only imagine what Professor McGonagall and her very strict demeanor must have been thinking, because she had to have seen Harry try to do this with his hair. Harry understands now that he comes by it honest, and his knobbly knees, and really seeing for the first time how much he does look like James, and that he has his mother's eyes, as he has been hearing a couple times already up to this point in our story. So after a couple more visits, he meets Professor Dumbledore, who convinces him to stop looking for the mirror, but explains how it works to him. Again, this comes up later in the story. So I want to read the inscription first, from the mirror as it's written in the book. Okay. Erised stra eru oit ube kafru oit on wasi. Which, when you read it backwards, starting with the I and wasi, and read it backwards, it actually says, I show not your face, but your heart's desire. Desire, Erised. What would you see in the mirror? That's the question of the week. What would you see in the mirror? To be honest, I don't know what I would see in the mirror, because what came to mind in researching and writing this episode, and we'll focus on one that I've held since I was the age of 12. And that is to meet my person, marry them, and have the most amazing life with that person ever. But what does that look like for me? And I want someone who actually sees me, who actually hears me, who can tell with just a simple glance that I am not, in fact, okay, even though I say I'm fine. I want somebody who's reasonably intelligent, well-read, articulate, funny, someone who is willing to do the work to make the relationship work and make the relationship as amazing as it could be, and what I'm willing to do in return. There has been, in pretty much every single one of my relationships, where I'm always giving more than I get. You know, I'm settling for scraps kind of a thing. I'm not going to have to do that with this person. So, in short, I am looking for unconditional love and acceptance, reliable, consistent emotional security, a desire for a protector or safe haven to counteract earlier feelings of fear and vulnerability and fear, someone who provides validation and affirmation denied by emotionally immature or abusive caregivers, deep empathy and understanding that was missing or lacking in my childhood relationships, especially with caregivers, predictability and stability to replace a chaotic or unpredictable upbringing, a partner who can repair or heal past emotional wounds, often idealized as the one who completes me, experiential proof of self-worth and lovability that was never adequately enforced or reinforced in childhood, consistency and dependable presence, contrasting with inconsistent or withdrawn early caregivers, emotional intimacy and connection to overwhelm loneliness rooted in early social and familial isolation, trustworthiness and reliability to overcome betrayal or repeated disappointments, acceptance without conditions or judgments, countering feelings of shame and inadequacy from childhood. So, growing up with a verbally abusive father, and again, I ran this through my preferred chat GPT-esque tool called perplexity.ai. Freaking amazing. And this is what it gave me. So, growing up with a verbally abusive father, the effects of that compounded with my emotionally immature mother's effects, if you will. I still hear it in my head from childhood. What are you crying about now? Snap out of it. Stop being such a poop. It is safe to say that there is a deep abandonment wound there, and so we're gonna dive into the psychology on this right now. Excuse me. Psychologically, the profound desire to find a soulmate or your person is especially common among those with a history of childhood emotional abuse and abandonment wounds. When a child grows up with emotionally unavailable, immature, or abusive caregivers, as you experienced with your verbally abusive father and emotionally immature mother, fundamental attachment needs often go unmet. According to attachment theory, which was pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, these early experiences create internal templates that influence how we view ourselves and others in adult relationships. Children who endure emotional abandonment may develop insecure attachment styles such as anxious, avoidant, or disorganized. This can manifest in adulthood as a powerful longing to be fully seen, chosen, and loved, essentially a wish to find someone who will provide the safety, acceptance, and unconditional support that was missing in my formative years. Many hope a romantic connection will finally offer the stability and healing their families could not. This phenomenon is not about needing someone to complete me, but rather a deep hope to finally experience reliable care and emotional security. And the Mirror of Erised in Harry Potter perfectly symbolizes this yearning. It's a vision of what's most desired, often tied back to early life's deepest wounds and unmet needs. So it's a natural response, but awareness and growth, often with the help of therapy, can help individuals build self-worth and emotional resilience outside of seeking this fulfillment solely from a partner, which is not what I want. I don't want somebody to fix me because they can't. I'm the only one who can do that. I just want to have the right person romantically and the right people platonically to support that, to encourage me, to support me when I'm down. You know, all of the things that I read that were missing, that's what I want. This allows for more balanced, authentic, and mutually supportive relationships rather than seeking a partner to fill an inner void created in childhood. So I am actively working on that and have been pretty much my entire life, given the fact that my longest relationship, romantic relationship, as an adult lasted just 5.5 months. It was never the right person. I never got the support I needed. In my earlier years, early to mid 20s, I was definitely one of those pick me girls. Some guy just wanted sex, and I'm like, oh, I'm so in love. That kind of shit. How that plays out. But I want to dive more into my trauma event and talk about my autism for a moment to expand on this topic. Recent research has shown that autistic individuals are biologically more sensitive to trauma and PTSD. Using advanced neuroscience methods and mouse models, Princeton researchers found that even mild stressors, which would not typically be traumatic for neurotypical individuals, can trigger PTSD-like responses in autistic brains. And this is due to specific differences in the brain's circuitry, particularly involving interneurons and the prefrontal cortex. And I remember just a few months ago, this was kind of the hot buzz topic over on TikTok, was this study suggesting this. And that really got me thinking about my trauma event, and my extreme reaction to it, which was PTSD. The study also discovered that these traumatic memory processes can worsen core autism traits after stress. Encouragingly, behavioral therapies aimed at reframing those traumatic memories significantly reduce PTSD symptoms in the autistic model. So, I can get some help. I can get some relief. I just need to stop fucking hearing, I'm sorry, we're not taking any new Medicaid patients at the time, because at this point in my life, that's what I have for my health insurance is Medicaid here in Michigan. And where I live specifically, I've been hearing that a lot over the last 2 years that I have been fighting this battle just to get into therapy. Now knowing what I need a trauma specialist. Okay. But this work highlights both the heightened vulnerability of autistic individuals to trauma and the promising potential of specialized treatment approaches, emphasizing the need for trauma-informed care tailored specifically for autism. So this is a lot. This is a lot. And basically since I first read that study and started diving into it more and thinking about my own personal experiences and the realization that I am autistic and what that means for me specifically, this has really helped explain why 12 plus years after the initial trauma event, I am still struggling because I never got the help I need. I still haven't gotten the help I need to deal with this. But now that I know what to look for in a therapist, again, that's probably going to be a bit more difficult until I can get to a point where I have the income to just pay for therapy myself, because I think that's what it's going to take for me. But the fact that all is not lost, I think would be the best way to say it, as far as I don't have to live like this forever. And I really fucking don't. I don't want anybody to have to live with this, because PTSD and complex PTSD are fucking insidious. I mean, they are. I literally would not wish it on anybody. So, in short, the Princeton study provides new biological evidence explaining why autistic people may find ordinary, going to use the finger quotes on ordinary there, may find ordinary stressful events deeply traumatic, and it points the way forward, and it points the way toward more effective individualized therapies for autistic individuals facing PTSD. Now, let's look specifically at my trauma event for a moment. So, if you don't already know, my trauma event was the sudden death of the man that I was dating at the time. And naturally, just on the surface, PTSD makes sense. But what never did make sense to me was the fact that he and I only dated for 10 weeks. When I read about and started learning more about this Princeton study that came out a few months ago, things started making sense. It's like, oh, it's just because I'm autistic that I had this reaction the way I did, which doesn't make it fake, I guess. I mean, it really is PTSD, but from such an innocuous situation, which is not to say that it didn't suck at the time or wouldn't have sucked for somebody else, but they would have bounced back a hell of a lot faster than I would under the circumstances. And this is true for a lot of autistics. Okay. Began wondering also if there was more to it than that. I'm autistic. My brain's always wondering and asking questions. Essentially, let me explain autism real quick and what I've learning, and the best way I would be able to describe it to, say, somebody who's like 5 or 6 years old. Okay? In short, autism is basically a different operating system as opposed to a glitch in a specific part of the computer that is our brain. Like with ADHD, OCD, etc. Autism is Windows versus iOS, or Android versus iOS. You know, everybody else is neurotypicals, and a lot of other neurodivergents tend to operate on one. Autism, and I believe there are a couple more that would be classified this way. But I only know more about autism. I don't know about the other neurodivergent types yet. I haven't expanded my personal education on that. But I'm sure there are a couple more that fall into just a completely different operating system. Okay. So this is where things are going to get very vulnerable for me with my stories. So having those two, having a different operating system, just totally makes a lot of sense to me with this. So here we go with the vulnerable stuff. So the night that I got the call from David's sister, David was his name, he was out of town for about a week, and I was expecting him home late Sunday night, or no, late Saturday night, essentially early Sunday morning, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning when I was sleeping. So, I expected to hear from him the next day, and 3 days go by and I don't hear from him until that Tuesday night when I get the call from his sister telling me what happened. And there were two primary thoughts that flooded my brain for months on a daily, sometimes hourly basis within those first few months following David's death. One, that God was laughing it up with his buddies up there in heaven over my pain. That essentially they were using my shit love life for their own sick, twisted amusement. That was the first thought. The other was something rooted in my childhood. I was about 8 or 9 years old at the time, and I had these stupid outdoor roller skates. They had metal wheels. And I was doing my little loop on our back patio. It was a decent sized patio. And I had one of those fold and play record players, and I had it sitting plugged in inside the sliding glass door into the backyard open, and then the record player sitting on that first step so I could hear it, because I had to have music while I was roller skating, right? But it had rained and there was a leak, and we had the stupid indoor outdoor carpet on the steps, which were cement, along with the rest of my patio area where I was roller skating. My dad comes in, says, "Oh, you can't have this there. Water and electricity don't mix." He put the record player away, shut the door. Well, my autistic brain, 8 or 9 years old, said, "Well, why can't I just have the door open? It's not like the carpet just inside the door was wet. It's not, no water's going to drip down," because it had dried out enough that the water wasn't actively dripping onto that back step. And so I did that. And my father came at me inches from my face, screaming at the top of his lungs. His face was red. "Water and electricity don't mix." And here's one of the aspects of autism that I learned that is related to my autism, or because of my autism. That made no sense to me. What happens when water and electricity don't mix? I did not know. And if he had simply been emotionally immature enough to stop talking to his children as though we are magically supposed to know every fucking thing in the world, instead of calmly explaining, "Well, when this happens, sometimes sparks happen, and if those sparks land on the carpet or the drapes, poof, there goes the house," that I would have understood. But going back to him being in my face and yelling. I'm surprised the neighbors did not hear him yelling. They probably did. That was my image of God in that moment, going back to the Mirror of Erised and my deepest desire just to meet my person and have this amazing relationship, somebody who truly loves and supports me and sees me and is willing to do the work to have an amazing relationship with me, was out the window. And God was shouting in my face, "Stop asking me for this. It is never going to happen. There is nobody out there for you who is a perfect for you match. There is nothing." So, after reading the Princeton study, that's what came to mind. And maybe start questioning, maybe it's not so much the level of seriousness, if you will, but maybe it's that the trauma event, on the face of it like a mask, is hiding the real issue. For me, that was the loss of something I'd wanted since I was 12 years old. At the time of my trauma event, I was 41 years old. So just about 30 years at that point. add 12 more years to that, and it's been 42 years since I started hoping and wishing for that. So I lost my place on my notes. Okay, I got it. So my theory, as I just said, is yes, I can understand the biology of why autistics experience PTSD differently, because it has to do, I think, with less synaptic pruning in childhood that neurotypicals experience. There's a lot more neural connections going on in an autistic brain, basically. But what if it's not so much about those direct differences that cause the PTSD? Again, a seemingly normal, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things event is hiding a loss of something bigger and more important. In this case, what I would see in the Mirror of Erised with this particular thing, just wanting to meet my person. That, and again, the loss / trauma itself was a mask for the true trauma, which starts to make more sense. So I was curious to see if there was any research out there to support my theory, and there is. So we're going to dive into this because, and again, this came from my chat GPT-esque tool called Perplexity AI, and I ran it through explaining everything, maybe not in as much detail as I have here, but giving chat GPT enough to know, or giving Perplexity enough to know, okay, is this possible, and is there any research, and if so, can you give it to me? Give me the reference. So yes, there are studies that support and help explain your experience. In autistic individuals, trauma and PTSD can result not only from classic big T traumas, but also from interpersonal losses or the shattering of deep attachment hopes, which are events that might not appear as obviously traumatic to outsiders. Research has shown autistics are more vulnerable to trauma and PTSD from interpersonal events, especially those connected to abandonment, loss, or significant emotional bonds. For many autistic people, the end of a relationship, even after a short duration, can be deeply traumatic if it represents the loss of a lifelong dream or a symbol, in my case, of an ideal person who seemed to fulfill deep unmet attachment needs. The grief is not just about losing the person you dated for 10 weeks, but the collapse of hope and meaning you had placed in that relationship over decades. Could this relationship possibly be the one? Obviously it wasn't, and I don't make that flippantly. I don't mean to sound flippant about that, but obviously not, since he's gone. This is powerfully exacerbated by childhood abandonment wounds, insecure attachment styles, rumination, and emotional regulation challenges that are known to be common in autism. Studies such as those led by Dr. Freya Rumble and others at King's College in London confirmed there it is. Confirmed that autistic people are at special risk for PTSD following interpersonal traumas, even when those traumas are not recognized as major by neurotypicals. They may also be more sensitive to these traumas due to neurobiological vulnerability, heightened sensory experiences, highly sensitive, and it's not just emotional. Very sensitive to light levels, concerts. I can't do concerts. It's way too much because of all the flashing lights, the noise from how loud the music has to be, and all the people and all the smells from the people and their food and drinks and all that. Just, I can't do concerts. Typical for autistics. Heightened sensory experiences. Okay, and the cumulative effects of long-term yearning and belonging, or for belonging and connection. So in my case, the true trauma was both the immediate loss of my partner and the emotional devastation of losing what he symbolized or could possibly. I mean, after 10 weeks, I didn't know yet. You're barely seeing the red flags at that point, unless it's obvious. But the majority of the time, you're not going to start seeing any red flags. So I had no clue whether I truly lost something or not, but the way that it all played out and the way that my mind immediately went to those two thoughts. Um, yeah, that's what he symbolized, was something that I would probably see, depending on what I'm thinking about, how I'm feeling. I would see a lot in the Mirror of Erised, my ideal partner from all of that. A decades long hope for deep connection, yeah. This complex layered response to loss is well recognized in current autism trauma research. So, as I was just saying, that is likely what I would see, again, depending on the situation. But if I looked in the Mirror of Erised like every single day, there would be multiple days a week that it would be a vision of my person. Um, Going back 42 years. I have wanted that for 42 years. Um, I would see our amazing relationship. I would possibly also see true friends who genuinely enjoy spending time with me, who truly support me, who do not leave me hanging in any way, and all of the fun we would have just being together and loving, supporting, and caring for one another. That's what I would likely see. So, yeah, that's been my journey with the PTSD and realizing that I'm autistic and what that means in relation to my entire life, what that means to my PTSD specifically. And yeah, this ended up being a bit heavier than I thought it would going into it. But as I said at the outset, I was just so excited to talk about this because I knew exactly what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about my trauma event, those two prevailing thoughts I had after I had gotten the phone call from David's sister letting me know he had passed. Um, that longing for just somebody to willingly and lovingly want to be in my life and support me and give me what I need that I haven't gotten. Um, so that was the big heavy loss, I think, for me. I am not personally dismissing the other part of it just because I'm autistic. This seemingly not a big deal event affects autistics more strongly. Yeah, I kind of get that, and I get the biology and I get the psychology of it. But for me, it is just a mask. It's like this thing happened as PTSD. No, this is what this thing actually represented to me, was the complete and utter loss of something that I'm still struggling with, if I will ever get that and have that in my life. Um, in more recent years, yeah, I'm starting to regain that hope that the more I heal, the more I put myself out there with this podcast, and once I can get past whatever mental block I have on posting on, TikTok and stuff like that, I never know what to talk about. I feel like I keep repeating myself, and maybe I need to get used to that, because the things I've been talking about here, I should be talking about on TikTok as well, to kind of, hey, people, I got a podcast, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, this was a big one. And again, my apologies for it being so heavy, but that's just how my brain works. That's how my brain has always worked. it's how I make sense of things. And hopefully this one will help you in some way, because this was a big one for me to share so vulnerably, because I don't think on TikTok yet I've even had that conversation about what were the two prevailing thoughts in my mind right after. God and his buddies were finding great amusement, because they have a sick, twisted sense of humor, over what I was experiencing in those first weeks and months. And that it was just funny to them, it was amusing to them. And then that devastating thought of feeling like God in my face, the way my father was that day when I was about 8 or 9 years old, not bothering to explain anything to me and just completely losing his shit. That's what God did to me, saying, there is no person out there for you. So I still have moments of feeling like that. But again, not as much in recent years. The more I work on healing that, and the more I keep following what feels right to me, is going to start getting me out of my social isolation and start connecting me with like-minded people. And then maybe, just maybe, I will find people, both romantic and platonic, who are genuinely there for me, who are genuinely Team Gabe. She's amazing. She's quirky. She's a big nerd, whatever. But who can fully give me what I need, and not the half-ass bullshit that I've been living with for pretty much my entire life. So, on a happier note, let's shake it out. Next week, we finally learn what Fluffy is guarding. As we quickly close out the book. Next week, we are on chapter 13, and I believe I got my notes here. Yeah, there are 17 chapters. We start Chamber of Secrets on September 17th. I will definitely be recording those episodes before the month of August is over, so it's really feeling like this is flying by. Wait until we get to Goblet of Fire. Things are going to slow up, because her writing, if you haven't noticed, seems to mature as Harry, Ron, and Hermione mature throughout all of this. So I know it's only August. Like I said, we don't start Chamber of Secrets until September 17th. But these remaining chapters are just going to fly by, because I'm putting as much effort as I can without short-circuiting myself mentally and, making things even worse, to already be working on those episodes before we close out the month of August. So yeah, it's flying by. So we do have a few more weeks together here with the Sorcerer's Stone, and until next week, I would love to hear in the comments what you think you would see in the Mirror of Erised, and I can't wait to read those. Until then, I don't have anything, like I've been closing out these episodes. I really don't have anything. So let's just do an early Merry Christmas to Harry and everybody. And I will see you guys next week for chapter 13. And I forgot to write down what chapter 13 was. I believe it's entitled Nicholas Flamel, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, we're rolling with it, and I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.